They told me I was marrying a monster. They told me he'd snap me like a twig if I breathed wrong. And still, when I met his eyes in that cold little chapel, I saw a man who could keep me safe. Oldwood groaning, and I stood there with my fingers numb in gloves that used to be white, thinking about the brother I couldn't afford to lose and the promise I couldn't afford to break. You ever feel the floor tilt under your life, and somehow you keep standing anyway? Yeah, that happened. The pastor mumbled vows as if he'd said them 1,000 times and got no joy from the 1,001st. And General James Mallister, broad shoulders, long coat dusted with snow, eyes like stormlight, spoke in that deep, even way that tells you a man knows how to carry bad news without letting it spill. He didn't kiss me. He inclined his head like he'd accepted a command. My father had signed my name on a dotted line to keep medicine coming for Thomas, and I told myself I could live with duty if it kept my brother breathing one more winter. But when James led me to the carriage, his hand steady at my back, not pushing, not owning, just there, I felt heat through wool and didn't know what to do with that. You're not here by choice, he said on the road, voice level, eyes forward. No, I said, and it scraped on its way out. I didn't ask for it either, he told me. But it's done. So I said the first true thing I'd said all day. We're both prisoners, and he didn't argue, which somehow hurt and helped at the same time. His house sat where the wilderness starts pretending it's a yard, all that dark timber and sighing snow, lanterns breathing in the windows. The room he gave me wasn't ours, it was mine, neat bed, hot water steaming in a chipped pitcher. You'll be comfortable here, he said from the doorway. My only rule is you don't leave the grounds without telling me. Let me back up a sec. I was ready to hate him, so I reached for the nearest weapon, my pride. I wasn't planning on wandering into the forest, I told him, chin up. He almost smiled, which felt like a strange kind of truce between strangers. At supper, a long table made for people who liked space more than company stretched the sounds of forks into something hollow. You don't have to be afraid of me, he said eventually. Should I believe that? I almost said, when the town says you're a cold-blooded killer. He finished it for me, not angry, not anything. I've done what was necessary to keep my men alive, he said, but I don't harm those under my protection. Well, I told him, you don't need to protect me. Just keep your distance. That was me building a wall with quiet bricks. He let me, and I both respected and resented him for it. Days fell like slow snow. I read by the window, walked the paths till my toes burned, and then went back out again to chase the burn away. I told myself I wasn't watching him, but I saw him unlacing his boots soft at midnight so no one woke. Heard him speak to the staff with a gentleness that didn't fit the stories, found dried lavender on my sill with no note and no need for one. Kindness doesn't erase graves, I reminded myself, because I had one in me marked for a cousin who never made it home, and the last name on my anger was his. Then the first crack in that certainty. Out in the yard, a stable boy dropped a bucket, water sheeting around his ankles, eyes wide like a stray. I braced for the bark of orders. James crouched, lifted the bucket with him, told him to go warm his hands, voice low, patient, not for show. No audience, but me in the doorway shadows. If you've ever felt your defense slip without your permission, you know what I mean? Winter got meaner, sky hammered flat and white. River frozen into a road you couldn't trust. At the ice's edge, he told me, careful now, thinner than it looks, and it didn't sound like a man who wanted control. It sounded like a man who'd seen people vanish. A storm blew up bad one afternoon, wind howling like it had a score to settle, and when the barn doors slammed open he ran into it without a coat, and I, God help me, ran after him. We shoved those doors shut with our shoulders, snow cutting our faces, breath burning. Thank you, he said, like he was surprised he meant it. That's how distance shrinks sometimes. Two hands on the same cursed door. We found small ways to share air after that. He showed me how to calm the skittish mare with a palm at the shoulder, a murmur in the ear. I asked about the ribbon of scar from temple to jaw. 19, he said, more courage than sense, and he left it there, which told me plenty. When I got sick with a fever, I drifted in and out of a voice reading me a book while a cloth cooled my head, and every time I surfaced he was still there, stubborn as a lighthouse. I woke one dawn to find him asleep in a chair, rifles slung like bad habits. Briggs led them, cheek scarred, sneer ready. Mallister, he called, we need a word. James filled the doorway the way a mountain fills a window. "You've had enough words," he said. When Briggs turned his gaze on me and called me Whitmore girl and her kind like the war hadn't ended inside him, James moved without moving. Just enough to cut me out of Briggs's line of sight. "Leave her out of this." "What do you want?" James asked, and Briggs said protection, which is the word thieves use when a gun makes grammar. They rode off with promises like hooks. I asked what they wanted when the last hoofbeat sucked into the trees. "Money, fear, leverage," he said. "I've dealt with them before." And then the truth slid out later. In a hallway with the lamp low, Briggs used to wear the same uniform I did, he told me, and the night your cousin died. Briggs broke formation against my orders and chased Glory into a blind canyon. I tried to court-martial him, and he ran. That knot you've been carrying, it was tied around the wrong throat. I leaned against the wall, air gone thin. That was the twist I didn't know I'd been waiting for. The one that made the world tilt in a kinder direction without letting anyone off the hook. 2 nights later they came for blood instead of coins. Shots cracked the dark open. Glass broke downstairs. Voices like knives. "Stay in your room," James told me. And for once he didn't sound like a man negotiating. He sounded like a man drawing a line in his own chest. "Promise me." I did, till I saw him stumble from the window, knees buckling. Hand pressed hot and red to his side, and my feet made a liar out of my mouth. The cold cut me in half on the porch, men peeling away into the trees, horses throwing mud. I dropped beside him and tore linen from my nightdress to pack the wound. "Don't you dare call it nothing," I told him. And when he said I told you to stay inside, I said what I hadn't planned to say for a year. "I couldn't watch you die. You're my husband." And that word husband suddenly meant everything it hadn't when the pastor first said it. We got him in. Mrs. Renshaw moved like a prayer with hands. Boiling water, bandages. Barked orders in a whisper, and I didn't leave his side. I watched the pain crest and fall like weather, watched him fight sleep because he wasn't sure he'd wake. And when it finally broke, he looked at me the way a man looks at shore after weeks of ugly sea. "I'll always put myself between you and the dark," he said, voice wrecked. "Why?" I asked. And he took his time, because somewhere along the way you stopped being a line on a paper and became the place my soul belongs. If that sounds like too much, well, you weren't in that room. Word traveled the way fear does, fast, so Briggs didn't come back. James healed slow, the kind of slow that teaches patience to people who don't want to learn it. Spring thawed what it could. Ruts turned to rivers then dried. The ice on the real river groaned and gave up its grip, and we fell into a life that fit us like clothes we hadn't known were ours. We didn't speak big feelings every day, but the quiet between us got friendly. He showed me the ridge where the valley spills gold at sunset. Told me he used to come there in the war to remember what he was fighting for. And when he looked at me and said what's worth protecting is sitting beside me, it landed and stayed. In town, people talked, because that's free and it passes the time. One woman asked if I'd softened him, like I'd taken a file to a blade. I told her he wasn't what folks thought and left it at that. Some truths you keep where the world can't smudge them. Nights, I'd wake and hear his window cracked open to winter out of habit and think how we're all built of the weather we survived. I learned he could play the fiddle when he thought no one was listening, that he liked his coffee so strong it could stand up and walk, that he'd mend a child's broken toy with the same focus he'd give a saddle. He learned I could draw a map from memory, and that I hum when I bake, and that I'd run into a gunfight if it meant not wasting another second on fear. Summer fattened the fields, and a letter came from my father stuffed with news and the kind of apology men hide inside pride. "I made the right choice for you," he wrote at the end, and I read it aloud under the porch shade. "Your father was wrong about many things," James said after a silence, "but not about this." We both knew what this meant without needing to point at it. When autumn finally lit the hills in fire and brass, we rode the West Trail again and stood on that flat rock with the valley opening its arms. "I used to think my life would end in a field," he said. "A name in a ledger, that's it. Now I think I was meant to end up here. With you." I told him I was meant to find the man everyone else was too blind or too angry to see. We stood quiet a long time, because some moments ask for silence, not speeches. And here's your ending, the one that satisfies and won't sit still. On our way down we heard riders far off, not coming for us, not yet. Just a reminder that a frontier doesn't change because you fell in love on it. There will always be men like Briggs, always a version of me who might have stayed angry. Always a version of him who might have believed he was nothing but what his war made him. We chose different. Tomorrow may make us choose again. Tell me, if you were standing on that ridge with us, sun going down like a promise that keeps trying, would you say forgiveness is justice or just a story people tell so they can sleep? Would you have stayed in that room like you promised? Or run into the yard like I did and call it love? Drop your take below. What's right? What's wrong? Where does a community draw its lines? Because out here the law is thin and the echoes are loud. And I want to hear where you stand.